NBC News Radio, I'm Phil Hewlett. The first results are in from New Hampshire's first-in-the-nation primary. 3 small towns held midnight votes, and the winners are President Trump and Amy Klobuchar. Michael Bloomberg isn't on the New Hampshire primary ballot, but he won the town of Dixville Knox with 3 write-in votes. New Hampshire has a little less than 1 million registered voters. President Trump and Vice President Pence paid their respects last night to 2 soldiers killed in Afghanistan over the weekend. The men were killed Saturday when an Afghan soldier opened fire with a machine gun. The first American infected with the coronavirus and evacuated from China is back in a San Diego hospital after being mistakenly released. Health officials say the patient was released Monday after an initial test indicated he was not infected. America's small business owners' optimism continues near all-time highs. The January mark is in the top 10% of all readings in the survey's 46-year history. Phil Hewlett, NBC News Radio.
Vote Denny Antoinette Mazingo for 42nd State Assembly on or before March 3rd. It's the people's time. We need a strong voice in the 42nd District that works for the entire district and will push for every resident on either side of the mountain. As a state assemblywoman, Denny will be the champion and voice for people of color and those without a voice. She'll be the voice for seniors living in the streets, for single mothers struggling to care for their children, and for veterans struggling to survive in a country they bravely defended. Denny Antoinette is running to bring programs to the most vulnerable among us, create competitive jobs, and to ensure a great quality of life for the people of the 42nd Assembly District. And he believes in affordable universal health care, education, equitable housing, sensible gun laws, and protecting our environment. It's our time. It's the people's time. Vote Denny Antoinette Mazingo for 42nd Assembly on or before March 3rd. Learn more at DennyMazingo.com or Google Denny Mazingo.
Paid for by Denny Antoinette Mazingo for State Assembly.
California headline news: concern among those quarantined at Marine Corps Air Station Miramar after confirmation that a second person who'd also been quarantined there has now been diagnosed with coronavirus.
It really makes us, more nervous, definitely. And the fact is now we know the virus, was here.
According to CDC, the patient was aboard that flight from Wuhan, China that arrived at Miramar last week. UC San Diego Health confirming the patient has been treated by the hospital, their condition unknown. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi accusing President Trump of wrongfully interfering in the Roger Stone case.
This is an abuse of power that the president is again trying to manipulate federal law enforcement to serve his political interests.
House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy says the Democrats are again overreaching.
They do not have facts. All they have is a mission to impeach, and this is all they continue to drive.
Attorney General William Barr agreeing to testify before a House committee amid questions about the Justice Department's statement calling the recommended sentence for Stone excessive. Jeff Scott, California News.
ADP isn't just in the payroll business. We're in the people business, helping companies find them, train them, and empower them by clearing the way for them to do their best work. Because when your people thrive, your business thrives with them. HR, talent, time, benefits, and payroll. Informed by data and designed for people, so you and your company can achieve what you're working for. Learn more at design.adp.com.
My portfolio's diversified, my 401k's maxed, but my savings account just sat there till I switched it to Marcus by Goldman Sachs. I'm earning way more now, and just between you and me, my savings are right on track. Feels like I got upgraded for free.
You can money. With an online savings account from Marcus by Goldman Sachs, you could earn much more interest than with the largest banks. Sign up at Marcus.com.
Comparison made to the 3 largest U.S. banks measured by total deposits. Rates as of January 21st, 2020 may vary by state. Goldman Sachs Bank USA, member FDIC.
Individuals and businesses with tax problems, listen carefully. Do you feel like you're losing control over your finances? If you owe over $10,000 in back taxes or have unfiled tax returns, we can help you take back control. The IRS is the largest and most aggressive collection agency in the world, and they can seize your bank account, garnish your paycheck, close your business, and file criminal charges. Take control of your tax problems now by calling the experts at Tax Mediation Services and take advantage of the Fresh Start program and new laws that may allow us to negotiate a settlement for the lowest amount possible. Our team of tax attorneys and enrolled agents can stop collections and get you protected so you can take control of your financial future. Tax Mediation Services is accredited by the Better Business Bureau. Call now for a free case review and a price protection guaranteed quote.
Call Tax Mediation Services now at 800-298-8662. That's 800-298-8662. 800-298-8662.
Are you ready for a new experience? To see life from another point of view? New hope, new expression, new joy. This is your radio hour. Welcome to Viewpoint with Father John.
And welcome. You're tuned to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or on the World Wide Web at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John, and I am your host, Father John Reed. By the way, you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Just go to Viewpoint with Father John, and you can send us different messages and such. I love getting your emails on both Facebook and Instagram, and some of you have been seeing some funny pictures that we'll talk about later, but you should stop that part. Thank you very much. You know who I'm talking to. So do follow us, and most of all, have fun with us. It's a great show, and if you're part of the online community, you know we communicate back and forth, both emails and direct messages and such, aside from some of those funny pictures. And it's nothing too outrageous, just something somebody sent me that I thought maybe take a second drink of my coffee because it was just kind of really out there. So, having said that, all of God's children are endowed with extraordinary purpose and ability. I'm on a quest to help as many as possible in fully realizing their divinely inspired potential. Disposing of false narrative and embracing genuineness inspires clarity of purpose. My role is to help overcome self-imposed limitations and realizing one's spiritual potential. And folks, I want to tell you about a great place in downtown Claremont called Claremont Pharmacy. That's where I get all my pharmaceutical supplies, especially for my diabetes. Anyone who knows how much trouble that can be, you really want a good pharmacist who has your health first on their mind. And Dr. Nikki Ho owns this establishment. And when I first started taking my prescriptions to her a few years ago, I saw a big difference. I've used big chain pharmacists in the past, and they're okay. They have their place. But there's nothing like having a personal pharmacist that knows your case, and it's not so overwhelmed with so many cases from all across America that they don't have time to be really personal. And when it's time for my stuff to be picked up, she sends me an email or she gives me a call. Yes, sometimes she actually gives me a call. But more important, when I walk in, she knows who I am. And that's nice to have going into the pharmacy. And since you're going to be in downtown Claremont anyhow, just go down the street a little bit, closer to the 10 freeway, to BC Cafe, which is my favorite eatery, also known as Kickback Jack's. Now, if you want a lot of food for a good price, this is the place to go because you can feed 2 men and a boy on one plate. Absolutely. In fact, I've often said if you went to the Philippines, you could probably feed a whole village on one plate of food from BC Cafe. And the food is delicious because it doesn't do any good to have a whole lot of food if it doesn't taste good, but it does. So go there, say hello to Jose, the manager, or Rocky, the owner, or any of the waitresses or bus personnel. Tell them Father John said hello and that I'm thinking of him. And if you see me there, because I'm there quite often, stop by my table and say hello. I'm always happy to hear from you, the listeners, and it's always a great surprise. I've had a few of you come from time to time and sit at my table and share with me about your life, and I'm honored that you do that. Tonight we have a really exciting show. My dear friend, the Reverend Dr. Father Gene Wallace, who is an Episcopalian priest. And also, he had been in retirement, came out of retirement, so really he's working at Holy Trinity Episcopal Church in Covina, California. I won't say Claremont. Covina, California. And he does a great job. But I wanted to have him here this evening because of the topic we're covering is Ash Wednesday, one of the best kept secrets in Christendom today, because we see people walk around with ash on their forehead and they think either they bump their head going in a doorway or they're Roman Catholic, and they don't realize this is a standard Christian tradition that even people who practice it, I would say a good 90% don't know why. It's just done by rote. And so I've asked Father Gene to come and explain the background of Ash Wednesday and really what the symbolism of it is. And so with no further ado, Father Gene, please say hello to our listeners.
Well, thank you very much, Father John. It's wonderful to be back with you. I always feel so warmly welcomed by you. And I think the thing that I most appreciate being with you is that I feel like I'm a pastor spending time with a pastor. And tonight, as we look at the issues of Ash Wednesday, I'd like to reflect a little bit what it was like for me in my life as a pastor and being with a congregation. And you'd said something about your pharmacist that you said it was so wonderful that they know who you are.
Yes.
There's nothing more wonderful for a person in a congregation to have that feeling, my pastor knows who I am.
Yes.
And there's one thing about sin, for example, or behavior that you don't want to talk about. You want to keep it to yourself. And Ash Wednesday is just the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Ash Wednesday is about, let's get it out in the open. Now, we want to get it out in the open in a way that's appropriate. There's no inappropriate self-disclosure involved in Ash Wednesday, but there is a public examination that goes on in Ash Wednesday that I think is very, very important for us to talk about.
Good.
But one thing I wanted to do with you, just a little fun way to begin, is when I used to give talks, whatever the setting is in my parish, I used to like to give titles to the talk.
Okay.
And then at the end of the talk and time of sharing, I would ask the question, how do you think this title worked? Do you think the title was appropriate? Would you title it something else?
Yes.
And so I've come up with several examples of what I might call Ash Wednesday tonight. The first is Ash Wednesday, the gift of clarity. Ash Wednesday, who am I? Ash Wednesday, let's be honest.
Ooh, I like
Ash
that one.
Wednesday, a pastoral dilemma. So I'm wondering, which of those appeal to you?
The dilemma.
The dilemma?
Yes.
Ash Wednesday, a dilemma. And why do you think Ash Wednesday might be a dilemma?
Because I think oftentimes we're afraid to ask our priests what it means. We're in a dilemma. We just want to go along with the whole group and act like we know what's going on when we don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so rather than ask the faithful question, why are we doing this? I just pretend that I do. So it's a real dilemma that I stay in the ignorance of it rather than taking the risk of asking and being the only one in the class who doesn't know.
So in other words, you feel like Ash Wednesday is something that you ought to do, but you're confused as to why you're really doing it.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's very, very common. And what I hope to do tonight in our sharing together is talk a little bit about the cultural shift that has taken place over the last 50, 60, 70 years that has left us in this place where, as a culture, especially in the United States, but probably all throughout Europe, we are no longer comfortable talking about sin.
Right.
We have a whole different set of terms that we use rather than the word sin. So I want to tell you a funny story, and you actually started to hit on it. I actually saw this take place on CNN.
Really? Okay.
Okay, there you have it. You know I watch CNN, so you get a little bit of the flavor of where I come from. But you know the congressional reporter Phil Mattingly. Well, it doesn't matter if you know him or not. Well, Phil Mattingly is really quite a good reporter, and wouldn't you know, he showed up one day on the set, and he had a great big, huge sign of the ash cross on his forehead. I mean,
Yes.
it was absolutely mammoth. I couldn't believe it. And I looked and I said, Phil, what are you doing wearing an ash on your forehead on national TV? Well, he started to get Twitters. Hey, Phil, what's on your forehead? You forgot to wash this morning. Is that your hair dye that's come down over your forehead? Well, eventually, Phil Mattingly tweeted back, and he said, hey, guys, I appreciate your concern about the perceived ink, bruises, hair dye on my forehead, but it's Ash Wednesday.
Right.
And of course, you know, saying it's Ash Wednesday, we assume, well, okay, that explains it. Everybody understands now. But it doesn't work that way. We're truly confused about what Ash Wednesday is. And
Yes.
I'd like to review a little bit of the background, I think, that has contributed to how we got to this confusion.
Good.
Okay, you want me to start?
I want you to start.
Okay.
I'm raring to go here.
Okay, so well, everybody knows we live in a very secular age.
Yes, we do.
We're no longer informed by the church for our morals, for our behaviors, for our self-understanding.
Yes.
And so more often than not, the church is catching up with society rather than leading society.
I would agree with that.
And I think probably most people today go to Ash Wednesday services either out of habit or a sense of obligation.
Okay.
And I suppose there's some merit that can come out of that. You hopefully derive something. But you're not really that clear. Where in contrast to this, if you take the Muslim and Jewish tradition,
all right,
when it comes to understanding sin and transgression against God's laws and God's commandments, there is no one who gets it better than the Muslims and the Jews. The Muslims have a full month called Ramadan.
Yes, that's
in which
right.
they fast and they reflect, they take responsibility. And then the Jews are even better at it. They begin with Rosh Hashanah,
Right.
Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the new year. And 10 days later, they have the holiest feast of the year, Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement.
Yes.
And every Jew will be able to tell you that the Day of Atonement is the day in which I turn to God and I confess my sin.
Yes.
It's as clear as that. You take the average person in the United States today, even the average churchgoer, they would be very hard-pressed to say, I confess my sin to God, unless you're from the Bible Belt conservative evangelicals. They do have a slant on sin that is more pronounced, and they would be more inclined to use that language. In the more liberal wings, and even in the Roman Catholic Church, there has been a redefining of sin that has been very subtle over the years. I want to ask you an experiment.
All right.
Go to a Christian church, any Christian church in your mind, and imagine asking the average parishioner coming out of the door, what do you identify a sin for me? What do you think they might say to you?
Well, probably the heavy ones: adultery, idolatry.
On my list. Okay, keep going. Keep.
Didn't pay temple tax. That is one of the sins.
Mm-hmm. Stealing. Mm-hmm.
How
about murder?
Murder's on there. The one I'm trying to think of, and I'm having a little air thing here, is where we want our neighbor's wife.
Lust.
Lust, but not just that. There's the actual biblical term for it is covenant. Covenant, your neighbor's wife. Yeah,
right.
To want her.
Yeah.
So those are the ones that come to mind right away.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty close to the
and
list.
Usury.
That's pretty close to the list I have. It's very interesting if you follow closely in the main line and especially in the liberal-leaning denominations like the Episcopal Church, of which I'm a priest. In place of those kind of sins, you now start to hear about the sin of global warming,
right?
The sin of drug trafficking, and the sin of gun violence. Now, it's very interesting. Those are all horrific things which need to be addressed, and they are a plague on society. But interestingly, when you think about global warming, drug trafficking, gun violence, whatever you want to put in there, who is being sinned against?
All of humanity.
It's humanity, not God.
That's true.
There's a subtle shift that has taken place.
Yes.
Where we no longer confess sin against God, but now we confess sin against human beings.
Well, speaking of that, Freddie's looking at me through the glass saying that I'm about to commit another sin, which is to miss our first commercial break. So we're going to be back in just 2 and 2. My guest this evening is Father Gene Wallace, and you are listening to Viewpoint with Father John. We'll be right back.
loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org. www.4pfp as in personalfuneralplanning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran-owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
For several years, KCAA has been marketing the Youngevity brand of nutritional and personal care products. Our experience with Youngevity has been 100% positive, so we are pleased to recommend them to you. Regarding nutritional supplements, we recommend Pollen Burst in the berry flavor and Tangy Tangerine 2.0 in the tablet form. For regularity issues, we recommend 3-Day Cleanse, and for personal care, we recommend Morning Hydration Cream. You can shop online for Youngevity at www.kcaateam.com, or you can order by phone by calling 800-982-3197 and tell customer support that you are part of the KCAA team. Youngevity is an American company based in San Diego. Call Youngevity at 800-982-3197 and ask about monthly auto ship that allows you to buy Youngevity products at wholesale prices. That number again, 800-982-3197.
My mom is a breast cancer survivor. The United Breast Cancer Foundation saved her life. Their free breast cancer exam caught the cancer early, and that saved her life. But now the foundation needs your help so they can continue offering free or low-cost breast screening exams, saving more women's lives. Help them by donating your car, whether it's running or not. They'll provide fast, free 24-hour pickup, and you receive a charitable tax deduction, plus the great feeling you'll get knowing your donated car is going to help save more lives. Just call 800-801-0434 to set the wheels in motion. They take cars, trucks, vans, and SUVs, running or not. Call 800-801-0434. The United Breast Cancer Foundation needs your help, and your donation could literally save women's lives, helping them catch breast cancer early, like they did with my mom. Donate today. 800-801-0434. That's 800-801-0434.
And welcome back. You're tuned to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or on the World Wide Web at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John. I am your host, Father John Reed. And just a reminder, you can pick us up on both Facebook and Instagram. And just a shout out to our sound engineer over here, Freddie. How you doing tonight, Freddie? I caught him off guard over there.
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Pretty good, pretty good. I can't hear you through my headset, but I'm assuming you're talking to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like we're married, huh? We're both talking, no one's listening. Anyhow, I appreciate all you're doing there in the booth, and I appreciate the signals going to commercial, but can you use the whole hand, not just one or two fingers? I appreciate that. I'm just kidding. And a shout out to Gabby. And those of you who are watching on Facebook Live, although Father Gene can't see you because the camera's turned a different way, but welcome, those of you watching us online there. So my guest this evening is Father Gene Wallace, and he's with the Episcopalian Church, and he's coming semi-out of retirement. He's serving on staff over at Holy Trinity Church. I want to give it an Orthodox name. I'm sorry, I'm an Orthodox boy. It's over in Covina, and I hope that you'll stop by one of these Sunday mornings and hear one of his homilies. He is a terrific orator. And tonight we're talking about the meaning and purpose of Ash Wednesday, and we were just going over how things have changed. Our focus of what sins are, instead of sins against God being sins against humanity. Now, I'm going to jump on that just a minute, if I may, Gene, because in some circles, that's almost synonymous, humanity and God, because without God, there's no humanity, and humanity is the expression of God. So could that have anything to do with what we're talking about?
Well, I think that we've become a terribly educated human family.
Okay.
And the more educated we become, we're figuring out our universe, we figure out our world, we figure out what it means to be a human being physiologically, psychologically, mentally, and all kinds of sciences have sprung up to address each one of those. So probably society today in the Western world is convinced that we don't need God in order to understand ourselves.
Ah, okay. I'm glad you brought that up. And there are some that do have that approach. I've seen that, and I think that does create a great spiritual hunger.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's called being a humanist or an atheist.
Sure.
But more generally, humanism. And I respect people who are humanist and atheist. I think that they have deep conviction, and I respect their position. I'm coming from the point of view of a Christian pastor, and therefore I still hold on to the idea that God exists and that our first relationship is with God, and then from there with each other. And before we end tonight, I've got so much I want to share with you. I want to make sure that I do give you what I think is part of the purpose of Ash Wednesday.
Good.
But for right now, let's underscore the idea that in our society today, in the Western world, we have moved away from the concept of personal guilt to social injustice.
Okay,
and,
I hear
and
that.
when we make that transition, in a way, it becomes much more easier to avoid ourselves. Because if you have an issue, let's say drug trafficking, a great evil, of course, but the more that you can pour yourself into that social injustice and that social affliction, the more you don't have to look at yourself, and
That's
you
true.
don't have to be responsible for yourself, and you don't have to do a whole lot of self-examination in order to be involved with issues of that sort. So I think what happens is that we get to a place where we start to wonder, how in the world is the church relevant? Do I need church? And of course, probably the majority of people in the United States are saying, I don't need church anymore to be a good human being.
Sure.
And it makes it very difficult to communicate. Let's say I had a young person come to my office and tell me a problem that she or he is having, and let's say it's of a real personal nature, and let's say it's potentially a real damaging problem. How much weight would I have if I said to that young person, or it really could be a person of any age, the problem with you is that you're a sinner? Will that work?
I don't think so today.
It doesn't work anymore, does it?
No.
But if you hold the conviction, which I do, that behind all of this is the reality that we've fallen out of relationship with God, we no longer feel accountable to God, then in fact, using that kind of language, you have sinned and you have to ask forgiveness for your sin, it just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, and I think, and now I'm just going to share, this is a personal opinion on this. Of course, I'm right, but it's,
I was ready for this.
Yeah. I think part of what has been a problem with this is there's a lot of areas in Christendom today where it's almost a badge of honor. I'm a sinner. We're all sinners. And what has happened in the Christian community is we have gotten rid of what the meaning of that term is. Instead, it gets whitewashed that, oh, because we're all sinners, we all fall short of the glory of God. That's not the way Jesus used it. It's not the way that Paul used it. It's not the way our Jewish ancestors used it, Hebrew ancestors. It really meant that we felt a separation between us and our Creator. And now I think it becomes sort of a tagline, if you will. And, well, you know, and instead of taking responsibility for what we've done, we just say, well, we're all sinners. And I can remember hearing a long time ago someone saying, going to one of these churches, well, why should I confess my sins to another human being? And I say, well, the reason we do it in the Orthodox is because we need feedback. And I tend to be more honest when I'm talking to somebody else and not just speaking to the ethos and saying I'm confessing it to God. Even in the 12-step programs, they talk about you admit these things to God, yourself, and to another human being. So even the 12-steppers get that. And so I think what we've done is we've tried to remove anything that we think has a sting to it. And what happens if you don't take the medicine, you don't get the health that comes with it? I'm not saying everyone has to have religion. I do say we do have to be accountable, because if we're not, then we just keep eating junk food, and what happens? We get sick. And I think that's kind of what's happened. So I just want to throw that in there with what you're talking about, because I think I'm leaning towards some of what you're going with here, if I'm correct, if I'm hearing you correctly.
I did a little bit of research, and by the way, I have to be honest and say much of what I'm saying and sharing with you tonight is not original with me. There are many authors who are taking this position that we have become more human-centric
right.
Than God-centric. And it's a fascinating study to look at it. But one thing I did come across, do you remember Norman Vincent Peale?
Oh, I sure do. They used to say...
The power of positive thinking.
Yeah, they used to say, who was it? I heard someone say, Peale's appalling. Oh, Paul's appealing, but Peale is appalling, they used to say, the evangelicals,
right,
yeah.
Well...
but I liked him.
Norman Vincent Peale wrote in the 1950s, The Power of Positive Thinking.
Yes, he did.
And it's as subtle as that is, and as much as he meant it to be helpful, it starts to shift away from, my problem is not that I have sinned, my problem is that I haven't been a positive thinker.
Right.
If I would just think positive thoughts, and if I would do some creative activities that sort of raise me above that broken self, things will get better. But then, interestingly, in the 1970s, Carl Menninger wrote a book, The Menninger Clinic,
right,
called Whatever Became of Sin. And he meant it sincerely.
Yes.
He was a psychiatrist.
Yes, he
And so he was very knowledgeable when it comes to the psychological issues of what goes on in the schools of psychology and whatnot. But he said there was a lot of merit to the idea that it could be that at the heart of it all, we are just plain sinners. And we have lost the art of confessing our sin.
Yes.
And so as a pastor, I have tried all kinds of ways to talk with the congregations I've served about the fact that there are all kinds of resources available to us today, but we have to be honest enough to realize that we have been given a revelation that is not unique to the Christian church. It first began with the Jews, and then was continued by us, and also continued by the Muslims, and also continued in the Hindu tradition. That sin is a transgression against God's commandments. And we have to have some mechanism for cleansing ourselves from the stain of sin.
Yes.
And Ash Wednesday is one of those mechanisms. I don't know how much time we have left in this segment. So
well, we're coming up to our next commercial in, how long, Freddie? About 6 minutes.
About 6 minutes. Oh, okay.
We're 6 minutes out. He keeps time better than I do.
Okay, all right. Well, what do we call sin today? Today we call sin a psychological imbalance.
Oh, yeah, I haven't heard that.
We call it a societal impasse. We call it a lack of empathy. And isn't it interesting how this all masks over what is going on deep inside? Even authors in their there's no end to self-help books and whatnot.
Sure.
And books that promise you that if you follow these routines, you will become a new and happier person. But I have to admit, a book that has helped me an awful lot is by the author Elizabeth Lesser.
Oh, yeah.
And she wrote the book Broken Open.
Yes.
And that book comes very, very close to identifying sin as a problem, but it doesn't come close enough. What Elizabeth Lesser says is that the truth will set you free, and the problem is you've been fighting against the truth. And the truth is that I'm not self-assertive enough. The truth is I haven't confessed my jealousy enough. The truth is that I'm judgmental. The truth is on and on and on. But who do you confess it to? You confess it to yourself, and perhaps to another human being, but nothing beyond that.
Right. Well, what do you say to the person who hears this and says, well, you're just trying to make me feel guilty, and that's why I left the church in the first place?
Oh, that's a big problem. There's no doubt about it. And I guess that's why Jesus always said, fear not, little flock. Because there were very few who are really going to honestly be able to accept and to be able to say, I am a sinner saved by grace.
Yes.
St. Paul said that he was the chief of all sinners.
Yes.
And it's all through both the Old and the New Testaments, or the Hebrew Scriptures and the Christian Scriptures, however you want to word that.
Sure.
That I have fallen short. And the idea that the crucifixion was God's manner of addressing fractured human beings.
Yes.
That somehow it was absolutely necessary for God to intervene in the human race in some unbelievable manner of self-sacrifice that would make it possible for sin to be washed away.
Well, to me, that goes along with the whole theme of life, death and resurrection, death and resurrection. If you don't die to self, you can't resurrect into the new person. Even Joel Goldsmith, in his book, The Thunder of Silence, said, and I quote, until the old man must die so that the new man can live.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get in touch with that sin, when we confess to that thing and say, okay, this is it, we have ownership, we admit it, we can die to that so that we could be reborn again, which is a constant thing. It's we're not just reborn once, we're constantly reborn every day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because at that point we've given it to God. With no sense giving it to ourselves, we already have it. So I agree with you with what you're saying. I think it's very important that we do acknowledge that and saying, okay, either I'm going to run my life or I'm not going to run my life. And running my life so far hasn't worked so well. So maybe there's something to this relationship with God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the most difficult things in my whole pastoral career, and I've been a pastor for well over 40 years, is to find ways to say to people, you need to develop a personal relationship with the living God.
Yes.
And you have to confess your faults, confess your sins to the living God. God is the greatest being to whom you confess. Confessing to another human being doesn't go far enough.
Right.
It's inadequate.
Well, see, and there, and when we come back from the break, we're getting real close to the break, I want to talk about the difference between the sacrament of confession and reconciliation between the Roman Church and the Orthodox, which are two different ways of doing the same sacraments. But I think we need to go to commercial first. And so my guest this evening is the Reverend Dr. Father Jim Wallace, and you are listening to Viewpoint with Father John. We'll be back in 2 and 2.
The loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org. www.4pfp as in personalfuneralplanning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran-owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
Dahibo Tea Club's original pure Pau d'Arco Super Tea comes from the only tree in the world that fungus does not grow on, so it naturally has antifungal, antiviral, antibacterial, anti-infection, anti-inflammation, and anti-parasite properties. But maybe more importantly, Dahibo Tea Club's original pure Pau d'Arco Super Tea builds corpuscles in the blood, which carry oxygen to our organs and cells. Our organs and cells need oxygen to regenerate themselves. The immune system needs oxygen to develop, and cancer happens to die in oxygen. The tea is great for healthy people and can truly be miraculous for someone fighting a potentially life-threatening disease due to an infection, diabetes, or cancer. Dahibo Tea Club's original pure Pau d'Arco Super Tea is only $34.95 plus shipping. Order now at DahiboTeaClub.com or call 818-610-8088. Dahibo is spelled T-A-H-E-E-B-O, so DahiboTeaClub.com, 818-610-8088.
If you plan to run for any public office, or if you're an elected official with a tough campaign ahead, you definitely need a radio show on KCAA to build your brand and attract voters. Think about it. You can broadcast and podcast a weekly show on KCAA for $150 a week for an entire year, production included, and spend less than the cost of a fancy mailbox stuffer that voters throw in the trash. Your one-hour radio program will be carried on 3 frequencies every week in the Inland Empire: 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, and 106.5 FM. So if you plan to run for any public office, call us at 281-599-9800, and our CEO will personally help you. Get started today on KCAA, the stations that leave no listeners behind. Call 281-599-9800 for details.
And welcome back. You're tuned to KCAA Radio, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or you can listen from anywhere around the world at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John. I am your host, Father John Reed. And a reminder, this is a listener-supported program. So if you please go to viewpointwithfatherjohn.com, go to the support button, and click on that and give whatever you can. It's a PayPal type thing. I'm trying to get that other app, but I haven't learned how to do that yet. Those of you who are trying to tune in on Facebook just now, you know that I'm not that sophisticated because I forgot to hit the enter button, and so I was just talking to my computer, although my computer says it feels much better now for that. When Father Gene and I left before the commercial break, I mentioned I was going to talk about the difference between the sacrament of confession and reconciliation, both the Roman and Orthodox Church. Let me preface that by saying sharing the differences is not saying that one is better than the other. It's just giving you some perspective of how we do the same sacrament differently. So I'm going to start with the Church of Rome, the Roman Catholic Church. And the way you do the sacrament of confession and reconciliation is you confess your sins to the priest and to God. The priest gives you penance and then grants you absolution. Penance could be to do some Hail Marys, some Lord's Prayers, whatever it is. Now, in the Orthodox Church, we do it a little bit differently. In the Orthodox Church, you confess your sins to God simply in the presence of the priest. We don't give penance because you came with a contrite heart. That's all that God had asked. And our job as the priest is to let you know you've been forgiven and to remind you that God loves you. And that's the same sacrament, just two different ways of doing it. Now, one thing that we absolutely have in common is that whatever is said in a confession can never be spoke of again by the priest. It doesn't matter what you tell me in the confessional, I can never speak of it again. You can. I can't. Even if I see you in public, I can't say, hey, remember when you said, I can never speak of it again. If you bring it up, then I can talk to you about it. So I like the confidentiality of it. But because these terms have been thrown around a little bit, I just want to give you a little perspective from these two different churches. And Father Gene, how would you jump in with some of that?
Well, I think no one likes to be told what to do.
I would agree.
And no one wants to be told in what way you have sinned. And no one wants to be told how you will suffer. I think there is a process within our own interior lives that we recognize that there's something terribly missing.
Right.
And something eats at us, and it could even be just as foundational as I'm afraid of dying, my mortality.
Yes.
Why was I born to die? So all of these questions are, as you say, the priest may be a mediator, but they're ultimately between the individual and God.
Yes.
And so getting back to the beginning of the show, I asked, what title would I give this talk? I think I would finally settle on Ash Wednesday, Who Am I? Because I think Ash Wednesday gives us answers that if we're willing to reflect on them, they give us at least a foundation that will hold in the test of life. And questions like my need for humility. Why do I find it so difficult to be humble? Why am I always fighting to put my point of view out there, to project my understanding? Why is it that I feel I have to know it all?
Yes.
An inner sorrow. So many people suffer from inner sorrow, and they wonder why. Why is it that we feel sort of an angst about our general existence? And the answer that Ash Wednesday gives us is that you're out of sync, you're out of relationship, and it's very easy to get back into relationship. All you have to do is confess yourself to God, not to a human being.
Mm-hmm.
There is an office for confession if that's needed, but for the most part, the confession is between yourself and God.
Sure.
And the strength of that confession is, it has a powerful effect to equip a person to say, I know my place in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not on a weak foundation the way I used to be. I'm on a very solid foundation, and that is my relationship with God is right. And that's a very liberating feeling.
Yes. So Ash Wednesday would be sort of an expression of the starting point of getting back in relationship. Is that what you're saying?
I think it's a starting point of getting back into relationship, and I think it's also the affirmation that I've always been in relationship.
Ah, there you go.
And there's one of the wonderful things about Ash Wednesday and the imposition of ashes is that the words are, remember you are dust, and to dust you shall return. That is a wonderful way of saying, remember you are limited. God is unlimited. And very interestingly, where does the priest put that ash on the forehead? Right in the middle of the forehead. And at that same place in the forehead is where the priest, when you were just an infant, marked the water, in waters of baptism, marked your forehead with, you are Christ, and you belong to Christ.
Yes.
Ash Wednesday is our way of saying, I agree with what was done for me in baptism. My family, my mother and father, my church family declared me a child of God. And now I take responsibility for myself, and I pick up that affirmation, say, yes, put that sign of the cross on my forehead with ashes, and I concur. I am a child of God. There's something very powerful and liberating about that.
Oh, I agree.
And, you know, I have to say, I have great admiration for Phil Mattingly, that he was able to go on national TV. He's the only one I've ever seen on national TV with a sign, with the ashen cross on the forehead. And that young man must know that he belongs to God.
Yes, and it's a powerful and important affirmation of our deepest identification of our true self. Because when we get to our true self, that's the divine relationship. And without that, I don't think we really can truly know ourselves. Because we're trying to pretend to be something either more or less than we truly are, and to be right-sized. That's not a bad thing. When I'm right-sized, it means I'm able to accept God's help. You know, as St. Paul says, we referred to earlier, one of the things he said I love is when I'm at my weakest, God is at his strongest.
Absolutely.
And and for that to happen, it's like one of my favorite poems called Broken Dreams, and it goes something like this. As children bring their broken toys with tears for us to mend, I brought my broken dreams to God because I thought he was my friend. But instead of leaving him in peace so he could work alone, I hung around and tried to help with ways that were my own. At last I snatched him back and cried, "How could you be so slow?" "My child," he said, "what could I do? You never did let go."
Oh, that is beautiful, Father John.
And
that is really, really beautiful.
And I think the Ash Wednesday is a part of the letting go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so seen in this way, Ash Wednesday is not a dark day.
Right.
It is a great day for celebration. It is a foreshadowing of the celebration of Easter Day. And it should be seen as Liberation Day. Oh, that's a beautiful poem. That is really wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
And you recited it beautifully.
Well, it just came to mind with what you're sharing, because I thought that that's what was speaking to me as you were sharing what you're sharing, because to me it is the great letting go. It's an apex of the baptismal experience, and I think you expressed that quite well. It's saying, yes, it's a great hallelujah. Which is an affirmation that we're in on this deal.
Okay? Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, I think our churches are the same in this, in saying that baptism is always and forever. And this is to remind us, yes, always and forever, which means right now. So would that be consistent with what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and so I have found over the years that, especially in small group studies and Bible studies and whatnot, having these conversations with parishioners, more times than not, they left feeling really excited about the fact that they were believers in God. And, I'm a Christian pastor, and therefore I have a belief in Jesus Christ that is personal to me.
Yes.
But, my sense is that people of all faith traditions, they find the center in God, that at last my life has foundation.
Yes.
My life has purpose. My life has clarity. My life has resolution. And it comes through these acts of penitence.
Yes.
Yeah. In every act of penitence, God is not saying, "You miserable sinner." God is saying, "My precious child."
Yes.
It's a wonderful, wonderful gift.
And that's both in Hebrew scripture and in Christian scripture, because all through the Hebrew scriptures, we expect God to be short-tempered like we are, and God's response is always, "I will love you so much more even, that you won't be able to stand doing this because my love is so great." Not because you're afraid of me, not because I'm going to get you, but because I love you so much. I was just writing about that today. I'm writing a new book, as you know. Oops, I'm sorry about that, guys. I didn't mean to hit the mic there. I got excited. But as I was writing on this very thing today, not even thinking about the fact we're doing the show tonight, just letting the words flow. And it was all about what we're talking about right now, the fact that God loves us so much. And I think we're so afraid to feel guilt, to feel shame, and that's projection. Because when we do these things, it's so that we don't have to keep walking feeling guilty. We don't have to keep walking feeling shame. And I'm going to say something kind of heavy out there that some people may get angry with, and if so, right, Gene, not me.
I am the pastor after all.
That's right, you are. And that's the fact that we're the ones who've held this against ourselves. God hasn't. And it's easy to blame the church. Now, I'm not saying the church has been perfect. It's run by human beings. And again, coming from dust, going to dust. We're limited. But God, where the church is originally formed, it's not God's will, and God's not inflicting us with the guilt and shame. What God is doing is calling us closer. All of our experiences in life is to pull us and draw us closer to God, not push us away. And it's hard to feel close if we won't even admit that we need the help.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, we're in our last couple of minutes of the show. Would you like to give any last thoughts or tell people where they can come hear you preach or anything?
Well, I just have to say from my own personal experience, when I was about 19 or 20 years old, it was sort of like a revival type worship service, and I was baptized again at that service, and I came up out of that water with this unbelievable feeling of I belong to God. And I have to say, I have not lived a saintly life. I've had my problems like all human beings.
Yes.
And I've gone through times of great sorrow, great loss, wondering what in the world is my life all about. And throughout it all, I never once doubted or questioned, does God love me?
Yes.
I'm absolutely convinced. And I also am convinced that in whatever ordeal I find myself, whatever difficulty, whatever self-doubt, God more or less assures me, this will turn out for your good if you will only trust me. And I found out more times than not, when I learn to trust and say, your will be done, not mine, it becomes a living relationship. And it's not hard to say, God, I'm sorry.
Well, very good. Well, we're in our last minute, and with this, I'm going to share a last poem with our listeners that goes right into what you just said, and this is called The Touch of the Master's Hand. 'Twas battered and scattered, and the auctioneer, though thought scarcely worth his time, to waste much time on the old violin, but he held it up with a smile. What am I bidding, good folks? He cried. Who'll start the bidding for me? $1, then $2, only $2, who'll make it $3? $3 once, $3 once, $3 and it's almost gone. But from a room in the back, a gray-haired man came forward and picked up the bow, and when wiping off the dust from the old violin, he tightened up the strings and loosened the bow. He played a melody pure and sweet, as caroling angels sing. The music ceased, and the auctioneer, with a voice that was quiet and low, said, what am I bidding for the old violin? As he held it up with the bow. $1,000, maybe $2. $1,000, maybe $3. 3,000 once, 3,000 twice. 3,000 almost gone, says he. And the point of this is,
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, 106.5 FM, and now 102.3 FM.